Hello, friends. Welcome. I'm Gianni, and I'm excited to be with you for this very special topic. I'm going to warn you, I'm in the middle of COVID, so you're going to see me struggle, but I'll be downing a lot of water and medication during this, and it's going to be great. So today we're talking about Abraham Abulafia, Ecstatic Kabbalah, and meditation. So what is that? Let's look at our title here. Who was Abraham Abulafia? What is Ecstatic Kabbalah? Can a regular person study it? Is it safe? What's the secret of the Hebrew letter permutations? What degree of seclusion is required for Kabbalistic meditation? Is meditation only for relaxation, or can it connect one directly to the upper force? How do you know if it's truly the upper force that you've connected to? Over 700 years of mystery and confusion will be resolved in this week's Kabbalah Explained Simply. All right, so that sounds like a tall order, but I think we can do it. Let's see. All right, so the reason we decided to do this topic is because Abraham Abulafia he was a Kabbalist in the 13th century. He was a great Kabbalist, a very serious Kabbalist, and he was not shy about disseminating the wisdom of Kabbalah. He really tried to spread it from country to country. He even went to the Pope. He was open with Kabbalah, even though until that point it had been largely concealed. And ascribed to this Kabbalist was something called Ecstatic Kabbalah. And what does that mean? Ecstasy, it's related to the word ecstasy. And when we think of the word ecstasy, what do we think about? We think about things that are really beyond our regular experience. I haven't had any ecstatic experiences lately. I mean, it's maybe like hardcore drugs or some romantic experience. I don't know, these type of things maybe you can get the feeling of ecstasy from. But for some reason, this form of Kabbalah that Abulafia taught got to be called Ecstatic Kabbalah, and we'll talk about why. To this Kabbalist also was ascribed Kabbalistic meditation, because in his writings he seems to tell us different ways that we can play with the Hebrew letters and meditate upon them and run them through our minds, and through this achieve some kind of special results. So let's discuss what this is. And of course, this Kabbalist, because these writings were out there and people didn't really know what to make of them, he gave rise to a lot of different kind of splinter movements, a lot of, secret societies, and different teachers emerged, and you can even get a PhD in Abulafia studies. Now, one of the people who got a PhD in Kabbalah and talked a lot about Abulafia was this fellow that I'm going to show you here, just to give us a taste of kind of the academic approach to Kabbalah. He said, I attempted to perform a few of Abulafia's instructions to the letter and experienced that they caused changes in my states of consciousness. This was one of the most famous scholars of Kabbalah. Now, when you think about states of consciousness changing, a change in states of consciousness, what do you think about? Just think about it to yourself rhetorically. What do you think about when you think about a change in my state of consciousness? And I'm going to suggest that most people, when they think about this, they imagine something psychological, a change in perspective, that I used to see life one way, and now I see life in a different way. And it's something desirable, it's something good, but it's not ecstasy, right? And people say that ecstatic Kabbalah is what comes from Abulafia if we could correctly perform the actions that he tells us. So there's some state of ecstasy that we're supposed to reach. So I don't know. I can also tell you that this academic fellow, in the end of his life, he wrote a poem in which he said he basically regretted that he'd studied Kabbalah all his life, and he was a great scholar. He was considered the preeminent scholar of Kabbalah, and yet at the end of his days, he had never attained what the Kabbalists spoke about, and he regretted this. And that's really the way it is with Kabbalah, is that you can't study it academically. That's number one. It cannot be studied academically any more than you could study a really lengthy thesis on karate. And if you studied this thesis on karate for even 1,000 years, you would actually be worse off than somebody who had spent even just 5 minutes practicing karate with an experienced karate teacher. You would be worse off, actually, because I would then have this feeling that I know so much about it, and I'd be proud that I know so much about it. And the moment I stepped before a karate teacher, it's also the same with Kabbalah, I would discover that I know absolutely nothing, and that I would need to completely discard all of the knowledge that I had learned for 1,000 years about karate, and I would need to start like a small child before this karate teacher and start to actually learn things that are totally different from what I had imagined karate to be, were I to learn it only by text. Now, this is what basically happened for the last 700 years in regards to Abraham Abulafia. Now, we're going to get to everything that we promised, but I want to also show you something that is written by a great Kabbalist named Balasulam. Many of you probably are familiar with him. And he's writing about a Kabbalist who came a couple of centuries after Abulafia. Okay, here's what he says, and you'll understand why I'm bringing this up in a minute. Here's what he says about the Kabbalist, the Ari, Isaac Luria. There are not enough words to measure his, the Ari, his holy work in our favor. The doors of attainment were locked and bolted, and he came and opened them up for us. You find in him a 38-year-old who subdued with his wisdom all his predecessors through the Gianni and through all times. All the elders of the land, the gallant shepherds, friends, and disciples of the godly sage, the Ramak, stood before him, the Ari, as disciples before the Rav. All the sages of the generations following them, until this day, none missing, have abandoned all the books and compositions that precede him, the Ari, the Kabbalah of the Ramak, the Kabbalah of the Rishonim, and the Kabbalah of the Giannim. These are just time periods and the way that different Kabbalists during these periods are referred to. Blessed be the memory of them all. In other words, he wants to say that these are truly great Kabbalists, holy Kabbalists. So holy, I'm even ashamed to be talking about Abulafia. But they were very great. But all of the Kabbalists since then, he writes here, they have attached their spiritual life entirely and solely to his, the Ari's, holy wisdom. So, in other words, all the previous writings that came before the Ari, people who wanted to study Kabbalah in a serious way and not in a mystical, oh, I don't know what it's about, so it's probably very special kind of a way, but people who really wanted to learn the method of Kabbalah, meaning maybe there is something called ecstatic Kabbalah. Maybe there is some spiritual experience, some spiritual world that I can open up. But if I want to do it in a serious way, there were no Kabbalists, according to Bala Sulam, who did not set to the side all other writings except for those of the Ari. Once the Ari came, that was it. So people actually stopped studying these writings. These are, for example, these are writings from the Kabbalist we're talking about here, Abraham Abulafia. And as you can see, I mean, of course, if you don't speak Hebrew or read Hebrew, they're even more mystical. But even just looking at them, they really look like something. What is going on here? And people really didn't know what to do with these writings. Why? Because they're written, not only are they in Hebrew, but even if you translate them, the person translating them even needs to know what they're actually talking about to correctly translate them. And I haven't seen a good translation. But even if you read them directly in Hebrew, they're written in such a way that it's impossible to know what they're really saying. So we're going to try to get to the bottom of it a little bit here today. But people for hundreds of years really were helpless with respect to these writings. And they nevertheless tried to use them because they found these writings. And without a teacher, they tried to figure out, just like that scholar in the beginning, he said, I tried to instead of doing what he usually did, which was write professorial papers about the history of Kabbalah and stuff like that, he tried to actually implement them. And I believe that he did so with all his heart. But to implement them, we'll see. We're going to actually go through one of Abulafia's writings and see how we can perhaps implement it. But without guidance, it's really, you'll see how difficult it is to do. And that's because these writings that people found, got their hands on over the centuries, they really were kind of lost with respect to them. Literally, it's like if, let's say, you have some tribe that comes across a car. They come across a car that's around their village, and it's an abandoned car. And as they're looking at this car, seeing what to do with it, they realize it's this magnificent invention. And they decide that, what we should probably do with this is make shelter out of it. This is an amazing piece of shelter that can guard us from the rain and the elements. And is this a good use for this car? Yeah, it's a really good use. It probably works better than the handmade things that they made of it, that they make their houses out of usually, and it works very well. So are they using this in a good way? Yes, they are. Are they using it for all that it could be used for? Absolutely not. And without guidance, they never understand that they could actually start this car and use it to drive with and go hunt game and have a whole adventure. And this is the way a person is, just naturally. He can't help himself when he comes upon Kabbalah, but he doesn't have guidance. Meaning he can use Kabbalah for all sorts of things. He can use these books. He can use these books, and he can do all sorts of actions that seem to be prescribed there. And some of the actions that are prescribed are like, take these letters, these Hebrew letters, and focus on them. right? Run them through your mind, do different actions with them, meditate on them. And so now I try to figure out, what does Abulafia mean by this? And when I'm doing these actions, do I come to any results? Yes, I do. If I meditate on these letters, I come to results. Just like that tribe I said, that they come to the result that now they have shelter. And if I meditate on these letters and I do all of these actions, probably I will come to the kind of result that that scholar talked about, that he said, you know, I meditated on them and I felt a change in consciousness. And so for sure, probably lots of people have come to this state of feeling that they came to a change in consciousness. And when I come to this change in consciousness or this meditative state, I might, if I've heard about that there's such a thing as spirituality or an upper world, I might also say, well, that must be what I felt then. That must be spirituality, because it did feel spiritual. Because if I meditate, really there is a benefit from it, right? Anybody who's seriously meditated and been really dedicated to it has felt different things. Why? Because in our world, we have a pretty unpleasant world, we could say, filled with war and famine. And thank God we don't know about each and everything, because we really wouldn't be able to get any relaxation if we knew what was going on in the world in any minute. Not to mention what's closer to us, it's usually not pleasant. And we're trying to just gain some respite from what is basically an inordinate amount of daily suffering and struggle for just peace, right? In fact, our entire life is just to get to retirement. We spend our whole life trying to build up just a nice, relaxing retirement in Florida or somewhere where finally we can rest. And so when we meditate, meaning when we block out the job, the kids, the family, all the different things that kind of struggle, annoy us and bother us, when we start blocking these out and we go into a kind of meditative state, if we're able to get into this kind of state where we block it out, which is also not easy to do, we feel different. We feel elevated because we don't feel our ego as much. We blot out the human level of our desire, which is the whole world is our desire. The human level, the animal level, the vegetative level, the inanimate level, everything is desire. Now, if I blot out the human level and just focus on the animal level, I feel a little bit better. If I go to the nature level and I just sit there and sit with a tree, and meditate on the trees, I feel even better. If I can go up to the mountains, be just with the rivers, and make myself internally like a rock, I feel even better. Why? Because relatively, I'm closer to nature, actually, because nature is balanced. Nature is whole. Nature is an ecosystem. It's a system of ecosystems that are all working together. And if I can get away from the human level and start feeling more of nature and forget all the human stuff, the news, the wars, everything, and go down to nature, and even just get to the level where even all I feel is the rock, no movement, this state already feels like something that I could only describe in my vocabulary as spiritual. And those who reach such a state and feel like they're reaching something spiritual, it's not totally wrong. Because spirituality is equivalence of form with nature. there are deeper layers of nature than what we perceive. And if I would reach equivalence of form with those layers of nature, then there are additional sensations, feelings, experiences. In fact, if I could attain equivalence with them, and not just the still inanimate level, like we talk about in meditation, but if I could attain equivalence with all of reality, then I would experience what might be called ecstatic Kabbalah. And this isn't a name that usually I'm comfortable with using, but just because this is how Abraham Abulafia's Kabbalah is referred to, I'm using this term. Now, of course, though, again, if I attain at least this equivalence with nature where I don't feel the human level, which is really what's broken, this is really the source of all our suffering, the ego. If I would not feel the ego, if I could truly reduce my ego, which is my will to receive, my desire to receive, that it has the intention to also benefit me, if I could reduce that to zero, I would feel absolutely no suffering. And so when I reach this state, I feel that if I've heard about things Kabbalists talk about, I might think that maybe I attained it. But this is kind of like if you had some nuclear reactor, let's say. And I don't know how to operate this nuclear reactor. But in this subtle machine, you can create a nuclear explosion, nuclear energy, something that really can swallow the entire Earth. But only if you know how to use it. And a scientist, a nuclear physicist, he goes there and he plays with it and he creates the explosion or whatever it is. And then I go in there and I try to play with it. And as I'm playing with it, the buttons kind of light up, let's say. The buttons are lighting up, and I go, oh, he said there was light. So when the buttons light up, that's probably the light, right? And I go and talk to this scientist, and I say, I saw the light. And he says, yes, I saw the light too. And this is what I'm like with respect to the wisdom of Kabbalah and Kabbalists, that when they talk about the upper worlds, it might be something totally different than I'm imagining. Because what am I capable of imagining? I can only imagine things that have been in my experience so far. This is how we came up with language. We saw a tiger and in the jungle, and we said, ooh, ooh. We said, ooh, ooh, ah. We made up some word that would describe this danger because it was near us and important for us to alert each other. So we came up with a word for that, right? And then we needed to give a word for banana because it was important to know where we could find bananas. So we came up with words for that, and they evolved gradually, different languages. For the spiritual experience, no word evolved. There are no words that evolved for this to describe it. Why? Because one cannot naturally experience the spiritual world. Rather, we need for this a special instruction. We need books. We need a teacher, and we need others around us who are also studying the same thing. We need these three things together. And that is why no words and actually it's impossible to invent words even that describe the spiritual world. There are no words to describe it. And that's why there's only rare instances where a Kabbalist maybe would try to convey a little bit of what's really going on there, what's he experiencing. But essentially, the entire wisdom of Kabbalah is not about the spiritual worlds. Even though Kabbalists say that there does exist a spiritual reality that exists beyond ours, that's as tangible as our reality, and even more so, and that to reach it, I need to cross this barrier they call the maxom. And when I cross it, I have now behind the reality that I'm feeling, I have an additional layer of reality that controls our reality, and that this is attainable. But about that, Kabbalists don't write a single word because there's nothing to say. There's nothing to say about it. All you can do is give a person the method for attaining it themselves, and then you'll have a common language if you both attain it. Because there are roots and branches. The branches come down into our world, meaning they're the effects of forces in the upper world. And you could talk about the forces that you're both attaining by talking about things at this branch level. But to somebody who's never attained it, if you start talking about it, they're going to think that you're talking about history or you're talking about our world. And that's the whole confusion. But there are a couple of instances, and I'm going to show you now. There's a couple of instances where Kabbalists do kind of whisper about what it's like to attain spirituality. And I'm just going to share this because we're talking about ecstatic Kabbalah. This kind of ecstasy from attaining spirituality. Now, even though we don't usually use this term, is there ecstatic Kabbalah? Well, there aren't different kinds of Kabbalah. There isn't meditative Kabbalah and ecstatic Kabbalah and academic Kabbalah. There's one method of attaining the upper worlds that, it's actually a science. We live in a reality that is very scientific, meaning it's all lawful. And the fact that we discover on the level of physics, chemistry, perhaps it seems less so, biology, it seems maybe not as concrete, though still lawful. And when we get to our level, the human level, we think we can do whatever we want. We think we have total freedom and human beings just stomp upon the earth and do whatever we feel like. But actually, we live in a very lawful reality. And the spiritual reality is also lawful. And though there is this perception that when it comes to spirituality, it's like freestyle. I can build a spiritual method for myself kind of a la carte. Like, I like this from this method, that from that method, this from this method. And it couldn't be that all of the wisdom exists in a single person, meaning a single teacher or a single method. In reality, the way we reach spirituality is very lawful. Like the combining of molecules is very lawful. And even if we don't understand how the molecules combine exactly, and it's based on probabilities and such, in reality, there was no possibility that a molecule came together in any different way than it did. It came by very mathematical channels. And similarly, we have to attain the upper reality through this lawful reality in which we exist. We have to attain it in a very specific, lawful way. And this is why the great Kabbalist Rabbi Nachman said, the whole world is a very narrow bridge, meaning, and he wrote a song about this, meaning it's a bridge. It's not supposed to be in order to do all kinds of things that we think we're doing in this world. It's a narrow bridge through which we're supposed to reach the upper world. And that is what is worthwhile. This is something more important than anything a person could ever attain in their life. And this is what Bala Sulam writes about it. He says, once every organ and tendon will say and testify that each and every person in the world, would chop off his hands and legs 7 times a day for a single moment in their entire life of tasting such a savor. So just imagine if I imagine, like a change of consciousness or something kind of light, something kind of off to the side in my life, just like an accompaniment, compared to what Bala Sulam is writing here. He's saying, and he's not exaggerating, that one's every organ and tendon will say and testify that each and every person in the world would chop off his hands and legs 7 times a day for a single moment in their entire life of tasting such a savor. And so we need to understand that, by the way, if you have questions, you can type them in the chat. We need to understand that what Kabbalists are talking about here is something very special, something very unique. I'm just checking if there are questions here. Okay, I don't see any at the moment. And that this is not talking about some permanent attainment of spirituality even. It's talking about even just once to taste what spirituality is. Okay, so there's one more where a Kabbalist kind of writes about the attainment of spirituality, and you'll see kind of how he's sort of at a loss for words, but he nevertheless wanted to try to convey this to us. And this is the student of the Ari, Chaim Vital. And so he writes, hold on one sec. He says, "What opened in me that minute is impossible to transfer into words. It was an impact. It is something that you would not imagine about spirituality. It is as though you did not dream of this spirituality, about the opening of this new quality in yourselves. Spiritual vision. You don't realize at all how far you are from the truth. This sensation feels like an earthquake is erupting under my feet. This intoxication given from knowledge of absolute beauty and perfection. No, all of these words cannot describe it. Mankind can't even imagine how poor our language is. Words can't express anything. Nothing. Our language is not ready to express the spiritual world. We're too primitive with our angular brains to understand the upper world. It's impossible to understand. You feel it with your heart, by song, and by sleepless nights. It needs to be comprehended, lived through. This is because it can fulfill only that place in a person which he has prepared for spirituality. It is as if we searched decades for a small door in a huge kilometer-sized wall and suddenly find it there, like I wasn't searching for it all this time. No, it can't be explained in words. Okay, sorry. So this is what the student of the Ari writes about the attainment of the upper world for the first time. He says, Ari looked at me and smiled. He knew precisely what was occurring in me, and only with him could I describe myself, for he felt it from above. What stands behind every word? Okay. So now, with our understanding of what spirituality more or less is described as feeling like, even though we can't dream about it, we can't even imagine what this state is. We could go to the writings of Abraham Abulafia. Now, before we do that, let's take a couple of questions. So let's see. We have Cheryl. Hi, Cheryl. Why do most people not believe those who attain spirituality when many seek it? Because I can't believe anyone. There's two options. Either I get myself some kind of guru and they promise me everything, whether it's something in the afterlife or something in this life, and I believe them, and that's enough for me. Or I have to attain it on my own, meaning I'm not interested in just, now I always use karate as the example, meaning it's not that we can't even imagine this example because it's ridiculous, but it's not that I just believe the karate master that karate's great. And it's enough for me to be next to a great karate master and that he will be performing great acts of karate. That's enough for me. I just love to be next to him. And I feel good about my life that I'm next to him. That's first of all. There's the other way where it's that I'm not even interested in this karate master being great unless by him I can learn how to do exactly what he does and become a karate master. And so there's no belief here. Rather, I need to, and with this I have no choice, I need to choose for myself, as Bala Sulam writes, I need to choose for myself a great Kabbalist, meaning one who has supposedly attained the spiritual world, and there's no way that I can verify that. It's called one studies where the heart desires. And I have to follow his advice to the letter. And I have to follow it and assume that if this person has attained spirituality, they probably know the method by which they can help me do the same. And that's all I can do. And if you're talking about believing those who attain spirituality, well, if I attain spirituality, I'll have no desire to tell anyone that I attained it. You'll understand later, but there's no reason. In fact, a Kabbalist feels the opposite, that he doesn't feel any need to tell somebody that he attains spirituality or talk about it. Rather, all his business is with the upper force. And only if he needs, and he sees that he definitely needs to teach others to help them do the same, in this case, perhaps he might allow it to be known that he's attained. But otherwise, he feels completely not like talking about it and only does so under absolutely necessary conditions and to a minimum. Let's see what else. Okay, Maria. Okay, you're reading Abulafia's student. He names the creator in different ways, like Elohim, Yahweh, Adonai. How do they represent different states of attainment and spirituality? That's exactly what they represent. They represent different attainments of spirituality, of the spiritual world. How? We'll talk about it. We'll talk about it in a minute. Mike. Hi, Mike. What is a reliable source in English to study Abulafia's work? I don't think there is one. Because first of all, remember what what Bala Sulam said about the Ari, that after the Ari, all serious Kabbalists stopped studying any Kabbalists before the Ari. Abulafia is a Kabbalist before the Ari. Now, you'll get a taste of why that might be when we will actually study Abulafia in just a minute, as much as we can. But so serious Kabbalists stopped studying all but the writings of the Ari. There's a couple of qualifications I have to give to that, because they also study the Zohar and the Ari, but these are considered the same soul. But they stopped studying them, and one who would need to translate, even just to translate the words correctly, needs already some connection with spirituality. And therefore, there isn't a good translation. There isn't a good translation, and there's not even a good way to read these writings without a Kabbalist teacher. And mind you, we would have to find a Kabbalist teacher who's willing to study Abulafia, even though Bala Sulam here says that serious Kabbalists don't study Abulafia. So this is the thing. And we'll see why in just a minute, why they don't study Abulafia. Let's see. To be conscious, how's it going? In an ecstatic state of consciousness, is an ecstatic state of consciousness something we should strive for? And if so, which way is helpful? That's a great question. And this is why Kabbalists don't talk all the time about the attainment of spirituality, but only how to attain spirituality. They don't talk about how you feel when you attain it, so that you'll strive for this ecstatic, beautiful state. Rather, if you follow the correct method, you'll reach that state, whether you want it or not. It's a beautiful state. Obviously, people would cut off their hands and legs 7 times a day to feel it. But no, we don't strive specifically for that. We need to strive for correctly administering the advice of Kabbalists. Okay, so let's go on to so before we go to the writings of Abulafia, let's go quickly to just because I need to recover for a minute with my COVID symptoms. Let's go to a video which is gonna show us really the practice of Kabbalah. It's an event that we're having very shortly. We're gonna have this event. It's an all-day event, and it's a way to really practice what we're talking about. I told you about the karate master, that we can learn, academically, but really we're more advanced with 5 minutes, even just 5 minutes, with an actual Kung Fu master, right? So this is actually the practice of it, and I'm going to play the short video, and then we'll get into Abulafia's writings.
The authentic wisdom of Kabbalah gives you the power to unlock the spiritual potential of our time. Thousands of Kabbalah students around the world already experience this on a regular basis. We're inviting you to get a real taste of it. Experience Kabbalah will be a one-day virtual event filled with experiential lessons, interactive workshops, and some unique Kabbalistic practices, all wrapped in the welcoming atmosphere of our thriving global community. You'll be among people from all walks of life who share a common desire to experience the spiritual reality. This event is designed to help you discover why you and the world around you are in the best possible place for a spiritual awakening, right here, right now. Registration is open to everyone on a pay-whatever-you-wish basis, so if you have that desire in you, we'll see you there.
right, I'll be there too, and I'm very excited for it. Okay, so let's look at some writings of Abulafia very briefly. And here we go. So this, I got here just a brief translation. Now, again, if we want to implement the writings of the Kabbalists, meaning their advices, and the only way I'm going to attain this unimaginable upper world is if I really implement their writings as they advise and not in my own style. So this is one of Abulafia's writings, and I just want to focus on the first thing he says here. So he says, prepare yourself. And later on, he's going to tell me to spin all kinds of letters and do all kinds of meditations. But, and that's what people usually jump to, right? Okay, where's the meditation? What name of the Creator do I need to meditate upon? And again, there is a benefit from doing that. But it's not a benefit that I could not get even without the Hebrew letters and even without the writings of Abulafia, meaning we could give different head movements and different things to meditate and clear your consciousness, and the benefit would not be less than doing it with Abulafia's writings, because I need to correctly implement this, and we need to see what he's actually advising here. And so if I had the importance of those advices, those alternative advices, as much as I have the importance of the wisdom of Kabbalah, I would come to similar results, because it's not so plug and play, Abulafia's stuff. So let's see here. What does he say? So prepare yourself. That's the hardest thing. Prepare yourself. What does it mean to prepare myself? Okay. So prepare myself means unify your heart. Unify your heart. This is already a problem. Unify your heart. What does this mean? So unifying my heart already means that in my perception, the entire reality is shattered. Meaning, I feel my body more than I feel what is outside of me. And the whole reality is called my heart, meaning this is my desire. And I don't understand that it's all inside me. But the children suffering in, India or somewhere, and the people at war who are dying bloody deaths, I don't feel that. I feel my arm. If you even just pinch me, it hurts. But them that are suffering horrendous torments, I don't feel. And that's a problem. And so unify your heart, which is the very first advice for preparing myself to study. This means that I would unify with the whole of reality, such that I would feel it not less than I feel my limb here, my arm. And so this already requires, because I have to come to a sensation, not just in the mind, this already requires the whole wisdom of Kabbalah. Because maybe I can accept in my mind that the reality belongs to me. If I'm an intellectual or if I'm spiritually inclined, I might be able to accept this in my mind, but I have to come to the sensation that the whole of reality is me, and all that exists beside me is the upper force. So this is his advice: to unify your heart and purify your body. Remember, this is all before I can do the very first meditation. So purify your body. The body is called the desire to receive. And to purify it means to put a screen upon it, meaning to completely rise above it so that I can restrict my desire that is in order to receive, that has that intention. But I'm not doing anything beyond this. I'm not thinking about reception at all. I only want to be above it because this is closer to the Creator, because the upper force, the Creator, is all bestowal, and I'm the opposite, 100% reception. So he's 100 miles an hour on the train track in bestowal. I'm 100 miles in the other direction. I need to come to a complete stop. And then maybe there's something I could do to also come towards bestowal. So that's purify your body. B1. Okay, so B1 means that after I've purified my body, then I can already start connecting all of the parts of reality to me in practice, meaning not just not receiving from them, not using them egoistically and thinking egoistically about them, but I can already start incorporating them into what is called a spiritual parsuf. So the entire reality becomes this spiritual exercise of my desires, where I'm sorting my desires and correctly using my desires eventually. Okay, and this is a big one. Isolate yourself. Because when it says isolate yourself, usually it means that I need to go up in the attic, in a dark room, find the quietest mountaintop. Actually here, not that that's bad, because like we said, there are benefits to meditation as we usually perceive meditation. But here we're talking about isolation of my unique desire that belongs to spiritual advancement, meaning all of the desires that I can use in order to bestow. And certainly there are some that through this preparation process, I've discovered that they are not ready to bestow. I can't correct them yet. So to isolate yourself means to isolate that part, that connection between the parts that can be used now for spiritual advancement. And so you see here we have the entire wisdom of Kabbalah. We have the work with the texts, with special texts by which we can draw the upper light, which actually does these changes in me. These changes are not like a change in my thinking, right? These are an actual change in the way that I perceive reality, the way that I feel reality, that this restriction is done upon my desire from above, and above the restriction on the ego, I feel the spiritual world. And so if I could do all of that, meaning if I can already perceive the spiritual world, then, and only then, and not in a room isolated from reality, but actually in this reality, all of which is coming at me on purpose from the upper force, who wants to give me this bounty, this abundance, this beautiful upper world that Bala Sulam and Isaac, the student of the Ari, wrote about. The Creator wants to give me this. He wants good for me, but he wants to give me all the good that he planned in the purpose of creation. Now, if I'm able to do this preparation work, that in this first sentence here, Abulafia really describes a very serious study that's not simple and requires meticulous daily work. In a group, usually, meaning like you have around you now, you have many others who are also engaged in the same thing. And with a teacher, through this, I can start to do, and this is not near to us, but I'm telling you this only to deliver on my promise for this session that we would talk about Abulafia. Then I could start to do something that is called combining the letters, beginning to combine the letters. a few with many in turn and revolve them speedily until your heart is warmed by their revelations. I'm going to focus here on the last line here where he says, when your heart is warmed by their revolutions. Because what does he mean here? That the great Kabbalist, Rabbi Akiva, says that love your friend as yourself is the great rule of the Torah, of Kabbalah. Because by this we come to love of the Creator and thus complete the purpose of our lives. And I have many desires that are in the opposite direction of that. And I need to correct each one of these desires. Now, this becomes like a beautiful adventure between our world and how I feel it and the upper world that I start to feel, and how there's no evil desire in me, but only desires that are in order to receive, that are selfish. But I can use all of them in order to benefit the reality, which I discover is actually me. It's my reality. And the way that I can do this is that I need to combine the letters, as he says. But this already means that, what is a letter? A letter is not a letter on the page. A letter is the combination of these two lights. The letters symbolize that I took my desire, any desire that I'm in, that includes the whole of reality. I took this desire, and before I even have a letter, I don't have a letter yet, I have the beginning tip of the letter, meaning I restrict the whole of reality the way it is, this circular form. I restrict it down to a point. This is called the Simsum, the restriction that I talked about. And from there, I have this Pandora's box of all of the evil, the so-called evil, that now I can open up and start using these desires in order to bestow. And the new forms in which I can start to use them, meaning the way in which that I can start to fill them with these two lights, is as such. And again, like I said with the atoms and the molecules, there are not many different ways that I can attain this. Rather, there is a specific recipe, a scientific combination that we're not able to cognize right now and use. But if I'm able to use my desire in this way and open it up in order to bestow, I can begin to use all of my desires. And the whole of the Torah is in order to bring each one of these desires to the warming of the heart, meaning to love, that I will love the whole reality and treat it both internally, in my thoughts and in my desires and in my actions, the way that the Creator does, meaning with absolute bestowal and love. And the whole Torah, if we look at this is, it says, in the beginning created, the Creator created the heavens and the earth. I just give this as an example. This is the sequence of corrections that I go through in the upper world as I'm correcting my desire and filling it with the light. But it all starts from this point, this initial point of restriction. And the whole wisdom of Kabbalah is in order to reach this simsum, this restriction, the crossing of the maksom, the entry into the upper world. And that is why Abulafia, people generally stopped studying him. Kabbalists generally stopped studying him because there was a special method that emerged from this Kabbalist, Isaac Luria, VRE, whose soul was reincarnated as Bala Sulam. And they have a method that is adapted to our generation, meaning through it, there's a special light and a special method by which we can very quickly come to the things that it's talking about. And if previously only a very few could study it, and maybe, if you're really lucky, after 30 years or more, you could begin to attain the upper world. In our times, it can happen very quickly because the effort that you put into it is multiplied by those that you have around you. So like this Kabbalah experience event that we talked about, or even on this event where we have less contact with each other, because it's just in the chat, but still there's a coalescing of desire here. And this nevertheless changes us, meaning you feel different in this environment. And this is billions of internal changes taking place upon you. And even if you don't feel how you're coming closer to the upper world, it still works. And therefore, we have this special event that I hope you will all attend. And I hope that here we've illuminated a little bit of what is written in Abulafia, even though we only came to the first sentence, because he gives us such advice that we can't implement anything after it unless we have the whole wisdom of Kabbalah, meaning the whole preparation period in a group with special texts and with a teacher. So I hope that you've learned a little bit. I hope that you will join us. If you're part of KabU, we have a special session, a special Q&A session. I'm going to have some medication for a minute, and we'll have a special Q&A session on a private Zoom. And I thank you for all your great questions and your participation, and I hope to see you at our Kabbalah experience event. Thank you all for joining. Bye, everyone.
Recording in progress.